Hey everyone, today for another vlog. I've kind of been slacking for these vlogs, I'm supposed to sort of do them weekly to get like a weekly, overview of what's going on in my life and such, or talk about anything that feels relevant or that I'm interested in. The thing is, I've actually made vlogs. I haven't like made them public yet, but like it's a series of like you know sort of vlogs or presentations of concepts that help me understand the modern world, the world we live in, which is really fucking confusing, right? Like so many ways in which our culture misdirects us. Okay, let's just call it brainwashing, right? To just be exact, it's brainwashing in many ways, and it just makes our lives a lot worse in favor of a system that doesn't really care about human beings. Like, that's kind of the series I've been working on. It's a series of vlogs, right? So it's also on this channel. Um, Problem is that like I'm not super committed to making it, so like it's much longer than I expected. I have like 25 episodes, and I've made like six of them or seven of them. I'm not sure. Um, yeah, I'm not super committed to it, so I don't really want to post like something that is like a third done when you kind of need the whole thing. But I'm making them, kind of slowly. So for the theme for today, I'm not really sure what I would call it. It's just a new model that I've come across, kind of interesting insights. So it's a it's kind of a crazy hodgepodge of or perhaps I'm not sure what's the other word. It's basically a collection of really different models to understand oneself. It's in the vein of personality test, but much no, much more like practical and in depth. It's called the body graph. I don't really know if there's like a better word for it. They use the term human design, which I find kind of creepy. It sounds really like cult-ish, but uh, I've just used it today. Just kind of getting the sense of what it is about. It's super confusing, but there's so many things. But the main structure of it revolves around chakras and astrology, and there are other systems which I do not know about. I do not know much about astrology, that being said, but I know, I've worked with the chakra system. It's very useful in my opinion, especially for people who are very dissociated from their body, right? Which is my case. And what the system revealed, the body graph, it apparently establishes that I am two things. One, I am supposedly, right? I'm not fully bought on it, but I'm just using it as like something to consider about. Um, Driven by what is the word they use? Like generator. Yeah, that's generator. Uh, in other words, active creative force, but it also means that like the typical cliche artist needs a muse or it needs an inspiration. The generator type, as they call it, works by responding to the world. So that's the first thing that they claim, according to my information. The second aspect is that I'm emotionally driven, which doesn't really surprise me, honestly, when I look at my life. I would say I'm pretty like analytical and intellectual, whatever. When it comes to like making plans, when it comes to choosing what to do with my life, then obviously it's quite clear that it's kind of hard for me to think it's someone who's not emotional when it comes to those things. But hey, it's more specific than that. Just not just making life decisions based on emotions, but just generally the sense of yeah, emotional wave. That is the main concept associated to that. So like the emotional wave of up and down. I think that everyone is kind of familiar with from their own lives. But the two takeaways I've seen from the takeaways I've gathered from those two things that it's actually the the type and what is the word they use? Yeah, type and authority. That is the word they use. So type is generator and authority is emotional authority. Uh, they're completely opposite to what I've been trying to do for the past years or so of my life. So the takeaway of the generator is that you need inspiration to do things, right? So like things don't just come to you. Sorry, rather things don't just happen because you want to. You also need sort of like an external input, right? In order to get that energy, that drive to do things. Um, so it's like a responsive. attitude. And I've been trying to be proactive in my life. Basically, as far as I remember having the conscious thought about how I want to live my life. I always wanted this sense of like proactivity, which is also the type of thing that is told to us through stories. Right? It's always about being proactive and all that. And the second thing, second aspect, the authority, which I've kind of done the opposite in my life. Is the emotional authority is actually completely uh, dictated by the emotional cycle of up and down. So on the other hand, I've always tried to be like follow this guideline of like emotional equanimity, right? So not necessarily control my emotions, but rather just ride the waves and just do the same thing regardless of my emotions, right? Um, Apparently, that is not really the way of the emotional authority. It's more like embracing the wave and experiencing all of it, including the shitty aspect of it, which also means, and that's actually a pretty crazy third aspect of it for me as well, that for those type of people, emotional authority, it is claimed, they claim, again, I'm not saying I'm fully buying into this, but it's just something I'm kind of entertaining as a possibility for myself. The claim is that the truth for them is never found in the present moment. And truth, by truth, I mean like relative truth, personal truth, what is right for you to do essentially. It's never found in the present moment because you're always at a point in the wave, and every point in the wave is like a bias, but it's not a representation of the whole. In other words, if you're on the high point, you will be overly optimistic, and if you're on the low point of the wave, you will be overly pessimistic. You will shut down too many possibilities and such. So, in order to really see things, you need to experience a longer time frame. That is to say, in much simpler terms, you need to wait. But you need to wait to just get a feel and not just get this emotional point of view, which is either too enthusiastic, will make too many commitments that you can't take, or is too pessimistic, shut down too many possibilities. Yeah, it's kind of weird, right? Because it implies that basically, if I were to follow this, it would basically mean that first I would have to drop this pursuit of like control over my productivity and output. Well, not completely, right? It's not complete loss of control, obviously, but yeah, like kind of ride the cycle, so to speak. Just embracing the fact that there are low cycles and high cycles of output, and the same thing with my emotions actually. So it's kind of interesting. I guess the key insight from those two aspects, the type and the emotional authority, is that it's apparently my being is quite cyclical uh, in terms of yeah, productivity, which is a big part of it. By the way, like the type is more fundamental than the authority, so to speak. Um, and so like the fact that the generator type is kind of like you derive satisfaction from your life through your output, basically, through your work or other things, or through other contributions, and that is very much been my experience. Uh, Yeah, and that's also probably why the last month or so haven't been very enjoyable for me because my work is so incredibly dull and boring and feels incredibly meaningless and a waste of my time. Yeah, it's very true that it's very difficult for me to like find a sense of like that I'm driven in life with my current job because it just feels like a waste of my life, even though I'm still getting money which I can save for later, but still for now it really much feels like it's a waste of my life. And so yeah, I think the that aspect of myself has been it's I mean the thing about like those types of models about understanding yourself is that even if you don't agree with like the entire model, it can still apply to you in some ways and still like valuable information, right? So like maybe you don't agree with the general classification of people, but in a way it doesn't really matter for me because I mostly only care about understanding myself, right? I don't care about teaching others how to understand themselves. So for me it's just about having the insights no matter where they come from. I don't really care if the model is kind of bullshit if the insights it has off about me are correct. And I think there's some important aspects of it for myself. I wouldn't say that, living a life purely based on this emotional wave is a good idea, even if I were truly to be that kind of person. Because, there's just this general aspect of life which is like based on momentum, right? So, like, you set up something, um, you know, which is, and the more you do it, the easier it becomes. So, that's the one big aspect of project management. And that's not based on emotional waves, that's based just designing your environments. Um, so yeah, I don't intend to like take it like fully, like 100% literally, where like like I can only do things with this like surge of outside inspiration. I'm not going to take the extreme version of it, but it is definitely something to consider because it's very much like in opposition with what I've been trying to do. And the thing is, what I've been trying to do hasn't worked well. Maybe it's because the implementation hasn't worked well, or maybe it's because the idea, what what I'm trying to do in general is not right. I don't know, but I think it's been valuable for me to take this possibility because yeah, I just feel incredibly tired. Um, it's kind of crazy because I think I've tried to make a vlog like the past week, and all of the ideas that I always came back to was just I kind of feel tired, but I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. That was always this sense of confusion, and yeah, I think the reason why I make a video about this, even though I've only learned about it today, is because it literally had this very real insight, like synchronicity about, it had this very specific paragraph about, how um, basically, trying to force something that you do not feel pulled towards will lead always to burnout and such and such. And you could say maybe that's general to everyone, right? That's kind of the things about those sort of personality tests and whatever. I can definitely see why people are skeptical of those because some of the statements are incredibly like general and could apply to anyone. But I think like the way they phrased it seemed especially key for me because like there's this conflict between the general like energy that comes from a certain resonance, you could say. Resonance is too fancy a word, but it's more like you just feel like doing something because you just really feel it with your whole body, not just your mind, right? But then there's the interference of the mind, which says something like oh, but I should work more, I should be more consistent and such, with the shoulds. And this resistance and this like top-down enforcement of an idea, it's very tiring. And I think this is very much something I gathered from that description, which really described it very well. My current situation is that I'm just trying to. It seems like I'm trying to work against myself. It seems like I'm trying to work against the engine of my that I was given. Um, and yeah, it's very interesting. Uh, this is by far the most confusing system I've seen. Like I'm describing it in very general terms because that's what I've seen, but like you should I don't encourage people just to see what it looks like because you have like the chakra system with like two additional ones. So instead of having seven, you have nine of them. That and they're not laid all in the same line. First of all, second of all of the chakras, they're called centers here. They're connected one over with like really weird arrows with numbers. I have no idea. Like, and the arrows also have a color code that could be three colors, right? So that's like one aspect of it. So that's like your self, right? Your body and your centers. The other aspect of it is that on each side of your body, you have like the all of the planets and all of the main influences of astrology, and I have absolutely no idea what those mean. It's fucking crazy to me, and yeah, I think that is like the two main parts of the body graph. It's like the nine centers and all of the relationships between them with those weird numbers, which I have no idea what they mean. It's like you have like a connection between your solar plexus center and your throat center, for example. Uh, and then there's like 2 hours between them, which have a number, but I don't know. No, like actually each end of the hour has a number, but I don't know what those are. And then you have like the true like astrology. So you have like two sides, right? I don't even know why there are two sides, but like you have like the nine planets and the sun, and like three other things, but like duplicate on each side, but with different numbers. Like there's like two different polarities or something. I don't even know what those are. It's the most confusing thing I've ever seen. It's seriously fucking deranged. Uh, but the paragraphs that explain like sort of like the whole thing, they make sense to me. Um, the numbers and the astrology thing, I don't know, they don't make any sense. I don't know anything about astrology too, so. But yeah, it's very interesting. I actually find it more useful than things such as personality tests, such as Briggs Myers. The reason why is that personality, it's kind of obvious why when I say it explicitly, but like personality tests are products of Western culture, which is incredibly emotionally repressed, right, and sexually repressed as well. Not saying that the East is much better, but I think it's more self-aware. I think the East is better, but like it's not perfect either, right? But yeah, I think that's probably why people resonate so much with like Eastern traditions. It's not necessarily because like there's always this downside that you can only understand them through translations and stuff, which can be very criticized. But I mean, translations are very lossy and stuff. And there's also the fact that the culture is so different anyway. But I think the aspect that people really resonate implicitly or explicitly, which people might not be aware of, I think is that generally those Eastern traditions, they tend to be much more in tune with emotions and uh, you know the just general everyday experience of a human being, which is emotions and sexuality and relationships and all that. Which is not to say that it's not something found in Western practice, right? Especially if you open yourself more to different stuff of aspects of like Western thought, right? But very much, at least like there's this general perception which might be accurate or not. I do not know. I'm not really here to debate, but I think this is a big reason why people feel so drawn towards those things, and this is why I find this body graph to be more useful, even though I don't understand it, than personality tests, because personality tests are so intellectual, right? The way they conceive of emotions is intellectual, which is like the biggest like fucking, I don't know. It's one of the worst things about understanding human beings is when you can only view everything through the intellect, and it's really, really uh, reductive, obviously. But yeah, so that's about everything I had to say. It's kind of weird to get the sense that like you've been working against yourself, perhaps. I'm not even sure what that means, but like it's always really weird, but to understand more about yourself. It seems it's way weirder than anyone could describe. It's not just non-linear. It's not just that. It it almost seems like it's like learning about a new dimension. It's as if you've been learning. It's as if you've been living in three dimensions, but then someone tells you that you can just live in a fourth dimension if you so wish. But that doesn't even make sense. Like how would that even work? But sometimes that's how it feels. Yeah, that's about everything I have to say for today. So thank you for listening. I'll see you next time.